project coordinator for Timber Watch Coalition in South Africa. His focus is on creating awareness of the socio-ecological impacts of industrial-scale monocultures, while he also supports solutions to climate change, such as community resilience through forest and landscape restoration using local plant species. Immediately to my right is Kim Carstensen from FSC, and Kim's the Director General of the Forest Stewardship Council, which he has held since October 2012. He was selected to succeed Andre de Freitas with the unanimous support of the FSC Board of Directors. He's got a proven track record within the environment and development sectors, which makes him well suited to validate FSC's position in responsible forest certification. Immediately to my left is Elizabeth de Carvalhais, who is the executive president of the Brazilian tree industry, founded in 2018. This is an association that represents numerous segments of the sector. In May 2015, Elizabeth commenced her 2-year term as president of the International Council of Forest and Paper Associations, a network of over 30 forestry-based associations from the main markets in this industry. She's also a member of FAO's Advisory Committee on Sustainable Forest-Based Industries. Ms. Carvalhais began her career at Volkswagen do Brasil and was vice president of the Brazilian Automotive Industry Association. To her left, we have Mike Peter, and Michael is the executive director of Forestry South Africa, the industry association representing over 94% of commercial timber grown in South Africa. He's got 26 years of experience in the forestry sector in South Africa, covering a wide range of aspects from forest management through to policy development in both public and private sectors. To Michael's left, we have Luis Neves Silva, who is the manager of the New Generation Plantations platform at the World Wildlife Fund for Nature International. He graduated from the Lisbon University as forest engineer with 20 years of professional forest experience. He has worked in the private, public, and NGO sector. He's worked with the World Wildlife Fund for Nature since 2005 in Portugal, Brazil, Chile, South Africa, and China, leading the New Generation Plantations platform. And then to the far left, Sally Uphold, who is the knowledge manager at the Institute of Commercial Forestry Research in South Africa. Sally's responsible for leading all aspects of institute-level knowledge and communication management technology, technology transfer, information dissemination, and event management. She's had more than 10 years of experience in the transfer of technology and knowledge from forestry and applied research. So welcome all to our distinguished panel, and thank you all for coming. We will kick off with the keynote address by Peter Panofsky.
Well, good morning, and thank you for being here. Thanks, Susan. I'm a forestry professor, as Susan said, and usually when we have a delayed start to a class, the students don't stay. So I'm grateful for you for staying. I've noted I've also got an Australian accent, and I'm sorry for that too, but I've got English words on the slides. As I note in my subtitle here, planted forests seem at first glance to be a simple idea, but in fact, as I think many of us know, the reality is quite complex. And even more complex, there we are. So I wanted to begin with this picture, a picture of the Black Forest in Germany, and I'm using that picture to illustrate the point that planted forests take a whole variety of forms in the landscape. The Black Forest is a mosaic of forests of different forms, including many planted forests. A few more pictures to illustrate the same point. We often think about planted forests in the terms of the monoculture plantation, a smallholder teak plantation in Laos, but we might also think about trees planted in agricultural landscapes here in southern Australia. And I'm sorry, I've lost control of the remote control. Or we might think about forests that are planted in urban and peri-urban environments. Canberra, the city I live in, is a city in a planted forest. Some planted forests over time come to resemble what many people think of as natural forests. This is the arboretum adjacent to CIFOR's headquarters in Indonesia that now resembles much more of a natural forest than a planted forest in many respects. And so it's helpful, I think, to see planted forests as part of a continuum, and that's how they've been represented in definitions such as those from FAO, where we think of a continuum of forests from unmodified natural forest through to trees outside forests. And in this schema, there are other ways it could be constructed, but in this schema we have a number of categories of planted forests, some of which are more natural, some of which are more like plantations, some of which are for restoration. There are obviously other definitions and gradations that we could make to this sort of schema. The next set of slides is simply to illustrate that planted forests, including plantations, fulfil a range of purposes. They might, for example, be for bioenergy. They're often, the public image of planted forest is often epitomised by this sort of picture of industrial forest plantations, and this for wood production, in this case in Brazil. They might be planted initially for restoration. These are pines on sand dunes in Portugal, and they're also producing non-wood forest products in this case. Or they might have been established for a range of purposes, including community empowerment and livelihoods, as is the case in this picture from Nepal. So to summarise the points I'm making from these slides, I think we can characterise planted forests as being established for a range of purposes, as having and delivering a range of values and doing so at a range of scales. Moving to my next set of points, as we heard from Ken McDicken on Monday in the Forest Resource Assessment TED Talk, planted forests have expanded very rapidly over the past 25 years, although the rate of increase has slowed over the last 5 years. Much of that expansion has been on what CIFOR called a decade ago fastwood forests, short rotation forests being grown largely for pulpwood. But there's also been significant expansion of the area of forest planted for restoration. Think of the example of China. These are a few years out of date. They don't take account of the most recent FRA announced on Monday, but much of the expansion of planted forests in terms of area over the past 25 years has been in the Asian region. So this is a picture that comes from the paper that was released as part of the Forest Resource Assessment 2015, so excuse the quality, I've just copied it directly from the paper. This is This graph shows that the proportion of the world's forests that are planted has been increasing for two reasons. The extent of natural forests, as we all know, has been decreasing, and correspondingly there's been an increase in the area of planted forests. The darkest line at the top is planted forests of native species. The mid-grey colour are planted forests of exotic species, and the lighter grey colour is natural forest in a time frame from 1990 to the present. So planted forests now occupy around 7% of the world's forest area. As a consequence of those sorts of changes and others, the balance of wood supply from different sorts of forests is changing. A paper was published last year. These graphs come from that paper by Russell Warman. He argues that wood production from natural forests has peaked. That's the dark line in both of these scenarios, and will continue to decrease, and correspondingly the production of wood from planted forests has been increasing and will continue to increase. The most recent data released as part of the FRA suggests that around 46% of industrial roundwood, global industrial roundwood, is now produced from planted forests. A third, so 33% of global industrial roundwood comes from plantation forests, 12% comes from other forms of planted forests. One of the consequences of that rapid expansion of particularly short rotation exotic planted forests over the past 25 years has been a history of contestation about the environmental and social impacts of those forms of forestry activity. And so there's a long-standing critique, a book by Larry Lohman and others in 1996, Pulping the South, about the impacts and political economy of fast-growing tree plantations. The picture here about the impacts of eucalypts on water table is from India in the late 1980s. More recently, we've had arguments around land rights and ownership and tenure and the displacement of Indigenous peoples, and we've had and have an ongoing debate about the use of genetically modified trees. We've got a very strong view from civil society, Wally's here on the panel with us, that plantations should not be considered as forests because of the particular characteristics and impacts that they have. So there's a very strong contestation around particular forms of planted forests, principally plantation forests. When I was thinking about how we might come to terms with this, I thought that one of the underlying issues is that there are different idiotypes of planted forests and different realities of planted forests, and I have a few slides to illustrate those points. Planted forests are often represented as helping poor families. This is a family from Papua New Guinea who are growing trees commercially. We have an image like this one from the 2014 State of the Forest report. That's a rather bucolic and beautiful image of non-wood forest products gathering in what appears to be a nicely planted forest. We have a strong emphasis on the integration of tree growing with agricultural systems by smallholders, and we have some stereotypes too. We have the association of beautiful and talented singers with the benefits of eucalypt growing, as in this Spanish record album, and I'll sing you the song another day. On a moonlit night, our love was blessed, the aroma of two bodies and the smell of the eucalyptus. That's just the first verse. So there are, as well as a number of aspirational and idealised goals of planted forests, there are also various realities. One reality is planted forests that are long-established parts of landscapes. Again, the picture of the Black Forest to illustrate that. There are planted forests on a large landscape scale, frequently under corporate ownership, picture on the left. And there are planted forests that are grown for commercial purposes by smallholders, a Papua New Guinea balsa grower in the picture on the right. And the discourse around planted forests also engages with a whole range of related issues, the issues of land grabs from communities that has in the past been associated with planted forests, is often now associated with other forms of plantation-based development. The picture on the left is from Riau province in Indonesia last year, where smallholders are converting peat swamp forest to oil palm plantation. And we have an emerging discourse around other future roles of planted forests, their role in a greener economy, in a bioeconomy, their roles in mitigating and helping us adapt to climate change. All of that is part of the discourse around planted forests. So to conclude this set of background observations, I think it's fair to say that there are many realities and there are many possibilities for planted forests and the different elements that we call planted forests. And it's most likely that planted forests will become more important in the future rather than less important. And so the challenge to us is how to ensure that planted forests are good in terms of a range of criteria that we might use to apply that test. Let me talk a bit now about that in concluding. Because of the controversies around, in particular, plantation forests, there's been considerable effort internationally as well as in many countries over the last 20 years or so to understand how we might practice the forms of planted forestry that are controversial, how we might practice them better. And so, for example, we have the outcomes of processes such as that convened by the Forest Dialogue around intensively managed planted forests. We have FAO's Statement of Principles around planted forests. We have learning processes such as the New Generation Plantation Platform that are intended to showcase and share good practice. And from those, I think we can distill 5 principles that should guide planted forests for the future. And those principles are listed here: good governance, corporate responsibility, an equitable sharing of benefits and costs, a landscape approach, and sustainability across scales. I'll skim through these briefly, we're behind time. Good governance applies to planted forests as to any other form of activity in the landscape, and the recognition of rights holders, the recognition of the principle of free, prior and informed consent is fundamental to good practice around planted forests. There are also important contributions from market mechanisms such as certification in ensuring good governance. Much plantation forestry is conducted by businesses, large corporate businesses, and there we have a body of work and literature that helps us understand how businesses can go beyond compliance to take the lead in their sector, not to be laggards. And there's a range of responsibilities that businesses have to the environment, to their workers and to the communities that they work with. the sharing of costs and benefits associated with various forms of planted forests is one of the most fundamental issues around planted forest development, particularly plantation forest development. We might think there about the diversity of ways in which those who are proponents of planted forests might engage with communities and with smallholders. We might think about the characteristics of equitable value chains that support smallholder partnerships. We think about the employment possibilities from planted forests. We also think about planted forests in a landscape context. It's the subject of much other discussion here and elsewhere, and it embeds our discussion of planted forests in that of the broader landscape, both biophysically and institutionally and socially. And finally, as with other forms of production systems, planted forests that are established and managed for any purpose need to be sustainable in a range of dimensions that we've come to associate and understand about sustainability. That applies particularly, but not only, to planted forests that are managed for productive purposes. So in conclusion, I think that the principles that guide us to help planted forests do good are well established, but the implementation of those principles remains challenging. Thank you.
Many thanks, Peter. Good morning, everyone. I'm Eduardo Mansour. I was the one late to arrive here, I'm sorry. It's a chain reaction of the time schedule. When another session starts late, the session starts late, and I was sitting in another session. Thank you, Susan, for holding the fort. Thank you, the panelists. And many thanks to all of you who come to this important session on planted forests. Peter, from the academic perspective, set the scene for the debate. We have a very nice panel here with us that can bring their points of view on the keynote that we just hear. You have the program in your hands. I would like to start with, in the same order as it is here, and I would like now for us to try and be binded by the time. We have been struggling with time management. No more than 5 minutes for each panelists. Let's agree on that, colleagues. Your perspective, your point of view, your comments on the keynote that has just been delivered to us. Are the 5 principles for the future a right proposal to move ahead? Give us the landscape for us to work with. You have other points on the presentation that you'd like to raise. Luis Neves from WWF, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Obrigado, Eduardo. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here at the Congress and in this panel. And I have had the privilege to share several debates and several conversations with Peter during the last week because the Congress has generated other opportunities for us to come together and to think across this complex issue that Peter has presented to us. And my first reaction is I think this is a brilliant and very clear explanation of the context on which the plantations debate is happening during the last let's say 2 decades, when the expansion has gone faster, and it was exactly a response to this context that I've become involved about 8 years ago on what today we call the New Generation Plantation Platform. Indeed. Working at a conservation organization such as WWF, our core business is to work towards the conservation of natural forests. So 10 years ago, our understanding of the complexity as presented here by Peter on the plantations issue, I must say, was really poor. But it happens that we have been at that time increasingly requested to be part of the conversation, to provide some answers that at the time we didn't have. For us, plantations has always been part of the problem, and it was clear. It wasn't minimally clear how it could be part of the solution. But from the public, from the private, from international organizations, from research, we were starting to understand that there was more that needed to be done if we wanted to be honest with our own call inside the WWF. We were calling for action at scale, and suddenly someone was knocking on our door saying, what action should we be doing? So, humbly, we have moved towards a learning process that is ongoing for 8 years with the plantation sector, with companies, with governments, and trying to learn from multi-stakeholder initiatives like the Forest Dialogue, and from the volunteer certification schemes in place in terms of how can we work with the sector, work with the plantations to help us achieve conservation objectives. How they were part of the problem, we already knew. How they could be part of the solution, that was something new for us. And just to come into some two points that I would like to leave here for the further debate. I think at this stage, as it was said at the side event yesterday from the Forest Dialogue on plantations, there is an enormous amount of information and knowledge around the world. The International Union for Forestry Research brings together hundreds of research organizations and thousands of researchers around the world. This information is not reaching to those who most need it, which are the ones which are in the field, managing the plantations, and the communities, the family farmers, who we need to bring to the level of technical knowledge that allowed us, together with the private sector, achieve a level of quality on the plantations management that avoid the negative impacts which unfortunately we still can find in many places, in many plantations around the world. So this is the first point in terms of reacting to Peter's presentation is we don't have these solutions at scale. We do have some benchmark initiatives in some places, but I think for me this is the big next challenge for the sector. How to make the investment, how to make the information reach to the communities, to the family farmers, in a way that they can be part of your value chain and your business will contribute to improve their lives, to help them to achieve their aspirations. And my second point, I will be really brief to stay on the 5 minutes. This sector, it's a terrible communicator. No one out there understands what you are doing. I am a forester, so I can talk on our behalf. We keep talking to ourselves in the language that no one else understands us. And if the sector wants truly be part of the portfolio of solutions on the enormous sustainability challenges ahead of us, I challenge the sector to put communication at the center of your priorities, otherwise you will not get the social license to operate. The Forest Resource Assessment was very clear. The plantations rate is decreasing significantly. That's all, Eduardo.
Thank you very much, Luis. At least I captured two very bold points. The benchmarks are there, but solutions are not at scale, and that we are terrible communicators. I got that. Elizabeth de Carvalhais, your perspective, please, dear.
Good morning, everyone. I represent the Brazilian forests, industry forests, and I'm chairing now the International Council of Forests and Paper Associations. So I will begin then with the ICF&PA. ICF&PA, we are around nearly 40 countries. The only private sector, all associations, the most important associations all around the world. And the importance of being there, the importance of belonging to this forum is exactly to keep the dialogue warm. So this is one of my most important points, the interaction of the forest. He was talking about communication. So the interaction of these forests with other countries in a forum that we have all sorts of forests, independent from planted or not, is bringing important points to our global community, the role of forests in the climate change, the huge importance of certification. So we have a very important agenda. So coming into our forests, so in thinking on the 5 points that Peter Panofsky raised, so I would say that for roughly information, Brazil has about 7.7 million hectares of planted trees, and besides this 5.6 million hectares of preservation in a mosaic system, so there is an interaction of planted and natural forests. In the side of governance, I would say that this mosaics example is what we understand a very, very important governance, so that the concern about biodiversity, the concern of interacting many sorts of trees in between a plantation. So we are more and more dedicating studies on this and in expanding our areas in more and more mixed natural and planted forests together. From the regulatory side, it's also very important in a country like Brazil, and I would say perhaps here the same, that we need to have very clear government policies, so that land tenure is the most important to expand this forest, to avoid conflicts, to guarantee the land of all populations protected by the Brazilian Constitution. When we go into in the corporate responsibility and sharing benefits and costs, then the most important action, the most activity of this plantation is the inclusion of people in the forest, small growers, outgrowers. We have about 20,000 families included in the business. So this is a shared value relationship. It's not a top-down command, it's a shared value relationship that you have a win-win situation for companies, for the families, and for the total development, not only in the business, but the economy effect, the resource effect of education, health, housing. The most important for us is not only to have outgrowers with us, but to have them leveled at the company level. So outgrowers in Brazil are being certified. The word certified exactly as big companies do. Outgrowers are learning and receiving all advances in cloning technology, in biotechnology, in the future for nanotechnology. So Brazil is prepared to expand the forest base, including more or less 40% of this expansion will happen in the inclusion of outgrowers. So we are enormously engaged. This is an emerging economy, a huge country. So we need to have the human being is the first place of our expansion and business. And what I would like to tell you more is that regarding the future, it's very, very important. This is a huge challenge that everyone here in this room, that we can bring forests I like communication, as Luis said, but we need to communication and actions, because people must see what we communicate. So the action, the planning action must come before the communication. So it's very, very important that the world understands the role of forests in the 21st century discussion, in the climate change, in inclusion of people, so that these forests, these planted forests, as we do in Brazil, we integrate agriculture, we integrate livestock, we integrate people, so that we are responsible for a huge, huge portion of this agenda, not only mitigating climate, but we can respond to INDCs of all these countries, but the most important is what we do with people. And the world does not know what we do with people. So what is the relation of a forest and good wealth for the human being? So this is a huge challenge. So there is an important agenda, you say, there is a huge important agenda in expanding and certifying the Brazilian industry, or the Brazilian productive forests will come into new products other than the products I know. We are coming into enormously into energy, enormously into biofuels for transportation, and new products coming from nanotechnology. Nanotechnology will be used in the automotive industry, in the airplane industry. So about what I said this yesterday, there is a study that says about 5,000 uses a tree can offer to the human being. So this is what we need to go into. This is what people and society needs to know. All of this must be certified, must be in the highest level of production. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for bringing us a set of issues which I could take note from my side: tenure, outgrowers, the regulations from the government and the police, the importance of mix into natural forests and plantations. But above all, what touched me is you mentioned on human-focused approach and the new products that are coming up and that are the industry is preparing to supply. We would like now to hear from the, based on the presentation that has been done by Peter, the point of view of Wally Mene from Timber Watch Coalition. Wally, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Phew, wave. How's the back? Thank you. Thank you very much. I came to this meeting with really mixed feelings, and I'm not sure how I'll feel when I leave the meeting, though. It depends on what kind of reaction I get from the audience. So listen carefully. Where's my slides?
Slides, please.
Wanda, we have some slides from Mr. Wally?
Well, before the slides arrive, I'd like to take a moment just to say that I do have a response to Peter's presentation, which is one that he might not necessarily agree with. He painted a very complex picture, in as much as he said planted forests are a complex idea. This complex picture is something that has been a problem because it's been the how would you say, the FAO's intention to deliberately confuse real forests with what we are now going to call fake forests, which are timber plantations. I handed out some stickers earlier, and those of you who didn't get one, I do have some available here. It's not that we're against plantations. Plantations have a very important role to play in society. They do take pressure off real forests. They do provide some employment. They do provide goods and services. However, in the balance, the way we are going with the large amounts of plantations, the large areas that are being planted up inappropriately in areas that are totally inappropriate. We are set to damage our planet irreparably. So, back again to Peter's presentation. In the last sort of 10 years or so, or 25 years, there's been this massive expansion of industrial timber plantations across the planet, the fake forests that I'm referring to. And as a knee-jerk reaction to that, the timber industry has put in place certification systems. We call them greenwash systems, because if you come and look at the plantations that are certified in the photographs that I'm going to show you, are they up? Okay, next slide, please. So,
Do you have a control?
Okay, there we are. Sorry, I'm a bit out of control myself. Some of you might recognize this kind of landscape. This is in the west of Ireland. What this picture demonstrates is that a real forest, a really old planted forest, it was probably 80 to 100 years old, has been completely destroyed, and planted in its place, which you cannot see in the picture because they're about 10 centimeters high, are Sitka spruce seedlings. Sitka spruce, which is a North American species, being planted in what was once a biodiverse forest. And now, because we have this wonderful expression, planted forests, we are replacing one planted forest that was planted, as I said, up to 100 years ago, with another planted forest. But they are totally different things in terms of the purpose that they aim to achieve. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, what is it? Okay. Sorry, I'm so used to calling for slides to change. Right, on the other side of the planet, in South Africa, here we have a certified by FSC Eucalyptus Plantation. This is, I believe, the third rotation. There is no topsoil left. The river that you can see in the background has had nearly all of its riverine forest completely destroyed. It was grassland before the eucalyptus trees were planted by SAPI. And this is certified as a responsibly managed forest. And when you buy commodities, whether it be paper or fiber, that were made from the trees that were cut down here, they carry that pretty little cuddly stamp, FSC certified. I think FSC should be ashamed of itself for allowing that to happen. I'm speaking to you, Kim. Next slide, please. We're back to Ireland. There's the question of invasiveness of these planted alien species. In South Africa, we are facing a huge problem. There are an estimated 11 million hectares of land that have been invaded by alien species, including plantation trees. Yet we only have 1.5 million formally under tree plantations, 1.5 million hectares. According to Timberwatch's calculations, we have another 1.6, 1.7 million of feral plantations. These are plantations that have spread directly from unmanaged or abandoned plantations in our country. What is FSC going to do about that, I would like to ask? And what is the FAO going to do about it? Because they have encouraged the situation and they are continuing to encourage it in other countries in Africa. I recently traveled through Mozambique. FAO is giving out alien invasive species to householders and small farmers around Mozambique in the form of Lucina trees. Lucina, fortunately, are now on our ban list in South Africa, because we know how dangerous they can be. The last thing I want to mention about that particular... Oh, we've moved on, sorry. This is a scene from Mpumalanga. I'm sorry, it's difficult to see out the back of my head. This is a scene from Mpumalanga near to the trashed landscape that we saw in the previous picture, showing the extent of soil erosion that can occur in areas where plantations have been planted incorrectly and mismanaged thereafter. And yet, they are still certified as they are in that photograph. I ask you, what on earth are we going to do in the future when all of Peter's extra plantations, these planted forests, are let loose on African countries and other developing countries into their grasslands, into their agricultural lands? Because where else can they go? Are they going to cut down forests to replace them with these planted trees? It's not acceptable, is it? But it's happening all over the world, because we saw what happened in Ireland, where a forest was cut down and planted with spruce. Next. Trying to get this. Can you try for me, please, Peter? Oh, there we are. Okay. This is another wonderful scene from South Africa. Anybody who lives in a plantation country like Australia, Spain, Portugal, yes, I will, when my slides are finished, I will know about the devastating plantation fires. California, Chile, even in France, Greece, plantation fires have caused massive damage at huge expense to the countries concerned and to the international community. They are plantations, they are industrial plantations, or they are feral plantations of escaped trees, and we need to identify them as such. They are not planted forests, whether they were planted by the wind or a bird or a monkey or anything else. They are not planted forests. Next slide. Let's get this right. Oh, other way. Sorry. Okay, here we are back in Australia. FSC certified. Wonderful, isn't it? Beautiful picture. Back to Ireland. A spruce plantation, absolutely devoid of any other form of life. It is not a forest. Let's get that straight for once and for all. If you want to call it a forest, it's a fake forest. Nothing more, nothing less. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wally, for bringing the perspective of those that have serious concerns about the plantations. And I can capture very clearly, your message was loud and clear. I think the impact of bad plantations has been very well illustrated. I also appreciate the fact that you said that you're not against plantations, but the illustration of the problems that they have been causing, specifically in the cases that you illustrated, I think is very, very visible to all of us. Let's move on then to Mr. Michael Peter from Forest South Africa, on your views and perspectives from the keynote that has been brought to us by our dear...
Thank you very much, Eduardo. Let me not sit too close to this thing. So I have a son, well, I have a few kids, 3, but I have a son who's a very good debater, and I've watched this young man debate over the years, and I've learned something important from him, which is sometimes it's important to start off with a little bit of rebuttal. So let me use the first minute of my 5 minutes to rebut some of what we've heard this morning and agree with some of the other things. I mean, I think firstly, just in relation to the presentation we've just received, it's a little shameless in some ways, because we see a picture of a compartment of a company that's named by the presenter, and that compartment, by my estimation, with nearly 30 years forestry industry experience, is about a 30-hectare block. I don't know how old the picture is. It certainly isn't a reflection of what
Point of order,
see.
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry. Can I finish, please? I didn't interrupt. No, this is, we're not debating. I'm using a debating technique, Chair. So the point is this, that the company in question owns over 350,000 hectares of plantation in South Africa. And so we're using a 30-hectare example as a proxy for how that company manages and how the FSC certifies, and I don't think that's appropriate. So let me get on to the next question that Mr. Many raised, which is our plantations, forests.
Point of order, please, Mr. Chairman.
I'd be pleased to tell you that many of my members would agree with your premise. And why would they agree with that? Because if we were not treated differently from the rest of agriculture, our regulatory burden would be a hell of a lot less, our fiscal and trade government would be a hell of a lot greater.
Point of order, please, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Peter, I would prefer that you go to the presentation.
No, so that's absolutely. So I'm speaking to the presentation.
Please. Yes, please.
The only problem with that premise is it follows. Yes, no, I'm getting to Peter's presentation. And you'll see in Peter's presentation.
Chairman, this is completely out of line. I will not be allowed an opportunity to respond to him, but he's ripping my presentation apart. This is not fair.
You'll have an opportunity later.
No, I think we had to establish a way of dialogue here, and the idea is that we had a keynote speech that was very vast, and I would prefer that the panelists follow this, and then the public, please prepare your notes, because the panel has to answer to you. Diversity is richness. We are happy that we can have diverse opinions, but I wouldn't like to concentrate into the 6 of us that are sitting here. So please, Peter, Michael Peter, if you could address your presentations as you have been thought.
Thank you, Chair.
And then we will leave the replicas bouncing through the public opinion, which I think we have to respect for those who are here.
Let's go to Peter's presentation, Chair. So in respect to Peter's presentation, I mean, I think the first thing to note, Peter, is that it was a very good presentation, but another thing I've learned is the difference between correlation and causality. And I was concerned at one point when you spoke about the number of plantations have increased as the number of indigenous forests has decreased, as if that was the main driver. That certainly was the driver maybe 20 years ago, but even Wally Many acknowledged in his presentation that plantations actually in the last 10 to 15 years have gone a long way to improving natural forest management and preventing forest degradation. So that's the first thing that I'll take issue. So the second thing is from a governance perspective. Certainly in the South African context, we have an excellent governance perspective. Our government, as early as 1995, developed a white paper on sustainable forest management, so we have an excellent policy document. We have excellent legislation that followed in 1998, and importantly linked to governance, other than the systems of management that industry has put in place, certification, in spite of perhaps what you've heard from others this morning, has been an extremely powerful regulatory augmenting tool. I think that's not just the case in South Africa. We've seen that elsewhere in the world, where if governments wanted to monitor and implement sustainable forest management according to a set of criteria, indicators and standards that they might develop, they would need a veritable army of regulators to go out there. So I think from South Africa's perspective, I think we still have, Kim, you might confirm this, the highest rate of FSC certification in the world. And I would tell you from a regulatory perspective, that goes a long way towards supporting the implementation of South African system. Coming to the community development side of the community importance to which Peter referred, we could not agree more with that premise. And certainly you've heard from Brazil, 20,000 family-scale grows. This is the one area, Elizabeth, I'm pleased to tell you we're bigger than you are. We have 24,000 small-scale timber growers in South Africa. So we haven't found community engagement to be a massive challenge from the plantation industry. People are voluntarily wanting to get involved because they have seen what has actually happened to livelihoods. That number has shrunk from 30,000, and that's not because people have exited, it's because the number of the guys that entered, and the women in particular, that entered at a small scale have now grown, and many of them have gone on to do very well throughout the value chain. But the importance of community engagement in South Africa has another angle, and that is we have a history of land dispossession that we've been working on over the last 20 years to try and rectify. So one of the things you're going to have to do if you're investing in plantations in South Africa is to take communities generally along, as you would do in the other parts of the world, and secondly, to try and address the issue of underlying land rights. Our industry has been, I would say, spectacularly successful relative to the rest of agriculture in addressing that concern. And one of the reasons for that is we have a strong value chain. So there's an immediate market, there's strong support from large enterprises, large forestry enterprises, to support new entrants into the industry, whether they are new entrants from South Africa's land reform program or some of the small-scale growers that have come into the industry over the last 2 decades. So I'll stop there for the time being, Chairperson, and we can take it up later.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate what Michael Peter brought to us in terms of the human focus, which I also heard from Elizabeth's point, with the special emphasis on the South African case, the issue of tenure, the history of land dispossession that is a reality, and the regulations that are available for plantations and for the involvement of outgrower schemes. So these are the points I capture from what's this. And then, Kim, this is getting emotional a bit, but very interesting. Kim is the director of FSC. You have your 5 minutes. I would very much like to hear from you, from the perspective of Peter Panofsky's presentation, and FSC.
Was safe.
We have to get
Was
it back.
safe.
I'm not allowed to answer questions asked to me, but I'll stay away from that.
You are very much allowed to answer the questions that this big crowd will bring to us in a few minutes. Thank you.
I firmly believe that planted forests, including intense plantations, are a part of the future. I don't see any other way that we will be able to meet the needs of future generations, etc. Do I believe that plantations are globally well managed? No. Do I believe that natural forests are globally well managed? No. Do I believe we have significant issues of natural value destructions related to normal forest management? Yes. Do I believe we have significant issues of social issues, environmental problems related to intensely managed plantations? Yes. Do I believe we have the tools to deal with that? Do I believe we have the tools to actually get better, both at natural forest management and at managing plantations and incorporating them in intelligent ways into the landscape? Yes, we do. Do I think we have examples of places where this is actually done very well? Yes, we do. What we don't have, and this is back to what Luis said also, we don't have the tools to get it to scale. Not yet. We don't have enough of those, and we need more of that. I think the 5 principles are great. Some of them I think we have relatively well defined. But what we must do when we work with those 5 principles is, first of all, admit that this is not going to be easy. There are significant challenges in doing all of this. In some contexts, land tenure issues are going to be an enormously complicated and difficult issue. Other instances, it'll be human rights, it'll be indigenous people's rights, it'll be the benefit sharing arrangements, how you're going to do that in practice. It's very easy to say and very, very difficult to do. Similarly, the environmental issues around this, how do we get the water management regimes right? How do we make sure that we plant the forest in the right places, also considering climate change that's going to come? How do we do that? And we need to admit we do not have all the answers, but take as a starting point that we are trying and that we are evolving and that we have some tools. Forest certification and FSC is one of those tools. And I think we have come a long way in actually dealing with a number of these issues. 3 specific things that I was happy with in the principles, that we do talk about the place in the landscape. To be quite honest, I do not believe that the biggest problem for forest landscapes is forest plantations. I believe it's conversion to other purposes, and we need to look at it in a wider context with the agricultural sector, etc. Second thing, and this was not really covered, I think, GM trees are coming up as something that will be looked at. Some are already working on it as part of what some will perceive as the future of intensely managed plantation areas. Be careful. Let's not destroy everything that I believe we are in the process of achieving in terms of getting the tenure rights, the tenure issues right, the environmental issues right, and then destroy it all by creating a situation where we, unaccepted by people, unknown to the population, introduce something that is completely new and will not be accepted. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater in that instance. Let's have a proper dialogue about all of that, including environmental, social, and all these issues, before we just jump in and do it. Second thing, climate change, I would like to have seen more involved in or included in these principles. I think there's enormous opportunities to look at the forests, the intensely managed plantations in the landscape, include climate change relevant issues in that equation. Because if we could actually get the forest interests together with the climate interests in saying, well, yes, we do need intensely managed plantations, but they should not just be huge monocultures. They should be integrated with restoration initiatives, with maintenance of natural forest inside that. If we could mobilize climate engagement on that, because that will keep climate or increase carbon in the soil and in the plants. If we could get that to work together with the forest interest that pulls in the same direction, I think we would do ourselves and our children and the remaining forest of the world a very big favor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Kim, I think at least from my point here, what really struck me was that you brought up the restoration aspect. That's very important. And the fact that integrated landscape approach has to consider the planting of trees, the planting of the other use of the land in an integrated way if we want to achieve sustainability. So I think that was a point that marked a lot. And the climate aspect, the climate change aspect that is not in the agenda yet and should be stronger considered. I think these are the ones that struck me. But we have had an enormous amount of very nice information about a topic that's at the same time very important and passionate. I think I would like to line up from questions from you to this panel. We have about half an hour, a bit more, as we start late. We can go late. Yes. No, I know about Sally. Yeah, didn't forget you here. But just to motivate you to think, because this is the way I would like to interact. Sally is here with us from the Institute of Commercial Forest Research. There has been an event underpinning sustainable tree plantations in Southern Africa, which was a pre-Congress symposium. So part of the program of this session is to present this result. And this is why Sally is joining us here. Of course, you can address questions to Sally too. I think you have a small presentation. Yes. And in the program here, you have 10 minutes. Could you try to squeeze it as much as you can? We have to benefit from the interaction that I would very much look forward to promote. Sally, the floor is yours to tell us about how it goes, how it went with the Underpinning Sustainable Tree Plantations in Southern Africa symposium that preceded the Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of what happened at our research symposium on Friday last week. I think what's become clear from some of what's been said this morning and in other sessions during Congress is we don't have all the answers. There's a lot of unknowns. Much of the debate comes around the fact that there's so much that we don't know. And for us, research is the answer to that. Not just research, but also the knowledge, the generation of information, and the transfer and uptake of what comes out of research. And that's really where our symposium was focused, on research, on knowledge, knowledge generation, and technology transfer. So our objective in holding this symposium was to showcase the depth and breadth of South African research, specifically into industrial tree plantations and related aspects, but also to show the role of research in contributing to operational and strategic decision-making, as well as in policy development. We know that wood is a valuable resource. We know that trees are good to the planet. They are renewable, sustainable, biodegradable, and a viable source for biorenewable chemicals. In 2009, it was estimated that while industrial wood plantations contributed only 5% of the total forest area, they could supply up to 2/3 of industrial wood requirements. We are faced with a growing demand for resources, for food, for fuel, for fiber, and for forests. However, we need to manage this resource using the smallest environmental footprint possible. We need to optimize the use of the fiber for new and existing products. And we need to operate in a way that delivers return on capital investment. So that's the global context in which we find ourselves. A little bit about the South African forest sector context. Our plantations are managed by large grower processors, but increasingly by a number of tree farmers or tree growers. That forest management is complex. It needs to take into account biological, social, economic, and environmental challenges. And the range of products, as we've heard, that come out of those plantations is also changing and increasing. Pulp, paper, and packaging is perhaps declining, but there's an increasing demand for bioenergy, for chemical feedstock, and remains still a demand for solid wood products. All of this across a fragmented land ownership, one that requires a wider range of end users from the same finite land base, many challenges for research. The theme of this Congress was forests and people and investing in a sustainable future. Increased investment in forestry and forestry research needs to reduce poverty, achieve food and nutritional security, and address aspects like climate change, conserving water, producing energy, and improving environments, and we are very aware of all of these challenges. We also know that Sustainable Development Goal 15 talks to the need to protect, restore, and promote the sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, including sustainable management of forests. The challenge is that sustainable forests means different things. Sustainable management. For a forester, it could mean the continuous sufficient supply of wood. However, for the consumer, it needs to be environmentally, socially, and economically sustainable. So what should sustainable forest management deliver? Opportunities, poverty alleviation, environmental stability, and this word resilience or bounce back that keeps coming up, social upliftment, all of these things. UFRO has already been mentioned this morning, and this gives us an international forest research agenda. UFRO's themes meet quite closely to those put forward as the sub-themes and dialogues for this Congress. Forests for people, climate change, forest-based products for a greener future, biodiversity, ecosystem services, biological invasions, and the forest, soil, and water interface. So what does the forest research landscape look like in South Africa? It is rich with more than 100 years of organized activity, which delivers value to the sector. We believe that investing in research is an investment in the future of forestry in this country. It will provide the knowledge that will support informed decision-making and policy development, and provide solutions to so many of the challenges that we've been hearing about. Over time, we've seen an increase in the service providers of that research, from primarily government-based research to research now which is undertaken by institutes, councils, universities, and in-house companies. What is the value of forest research? Just one example perhaps looks over the last 30 years, where we've seen a very small increase in a forested area of less than 10%, and yet a total increase in production of nearly 56%. That could be attributed quite significantly to research. So what then is the role for forest research? To provide the knowledge and technology to support operational and strategic decision-making, to respond to the new threats and challenges that are facing us, and yes, to inform policy and strategic thinking, which will enable and empower us to respond to change and provide us with the technology and knowledge to achieve this. So in our research symposium, we had some 25 papers that covered a broad range of research, and I cannot even hope to do justice to these. But what were some of the things that came up? Fast-growing tree plantations are now grown as short rotation woody biomass crops. 1.3 million hectares of plantation is producing around 20 million tons of renewable biomass feedstock. As we've already heard, we essentially are operating from a static land base, and yet this land base is a mosaic of multiple land uses within which we need to integrate. We need to have continual improved productivity, we need sustainability, and as a sector, we need to remain globally competitive. In South Africa, as we've already heard, due to land tenure, land redistribution, there is a change in ownership with an exciting increase in the number of small-scale tree growers. People, and there's a need then for research to respond towards the improvement of rural livelihoods and to support this transformation. It's perhaps the area where there's least research that's been done, and it's a challenge for us then to respond in terms of understanding the socio-economic impacts of plantations, specifically on communities. There have been rapid developments in the fields of hybrid and clonal forestry, biotechnology, and the development of genomic tools, and I think South Africa is leading the world in some of these areas of research. Similarly, there's been a huge increase in the number of multiple end products, pulp and paper perhaps on the decline, but bioenergy, chemical feedstocks, and solid wood products, and all of these require research to produce technology and innovation. We need to continually understand our impact on the environment, be it water use, biodiversity, or carbon stocks, and even soils. And again, to come back to the theme of this Congress, there's a need for resilience in the way we respond to the threats of climate change and biotic and abiotic risks. So what will research in the future look like? We believe the sustained success of the forestry sector in South Africa is based on our ability to change and adapt. And research and development is as important to successful change tomorrow as it is today and as it was yesterday. We're dealing with complex systems that require relevant, responsive, and innovative research that will provide us with integrated solutions. These research programs need to be multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and address both social and scientific issues. So there's a challenge that we're putting out. This requires increased and stable investment in research through public-private partnerships, and specifically in terms of research to support small-scale growers. Forest researchers in the future will be equipped with different skills, scientific, business, and social skills. So in conclusion, here's my take-home message. In the future, forestry research will be driven by the need for knowledge to overcome new issues and new challenges. Research collaboration and partnerships that cross public, private boundaries, as well as national and international boundaries, are necessary. They're even mandatory to ensure a globally competitive and sustainable sector into the future. Thank you, and siyabonga.
Thank you very much, Sally. I think we started with the research perspective from the Australian University. We conclude the presentations or the debate, the points of view of the panel with the presentations. Let's propose also to be respectful with the time of the session that will come after us, because these rooms are booked in a rolling basis. Can I propose that we entertain about 20 minutes of questions and answers? We have 2 micros here in the center. I would ask you to, because the micros are standing, can you just go to the mic and queue? We'll take maybe 5 questions first, then we'll take another 5. So just please bear with us, queue for your position in the order there, and then you put your questions. 1-minute questions, please. Okay. Or less. Just be pointing. You can identify yourself. The micros will come to life. Just a minute. You identify yourself, you put your question, and you can direct your question to one of the panelists or to all the panel. Of course, all of us here, Sally, Luis, Michael, Elizabeth, Kim, Wally, Peter, even me, but please, I want to moderate this. We'll be happy to try to answer or to discuss, to establish the discussion. I will take first from the front, then from that. Wanda, can I have the microphones on, please? Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. My name is Andrei Lalitin. I am with Global Forest Coalition, and I am NGO focal point for the United Nations Forum on Forests. Thanks. We heard about genetically modified trees from Kim, from FSC position. But I would like to hear about attitude to this issue from other points of view, from science, from NGOs, and from industry. Thank you.
Thank you. We have the one on GM trees. From the back, please. Lady.
Thank you very much. My name is Simone Lovea, also with the Global Forest Coalition. One brief introductory remark. I had the pleasure of driving more than 10 hours all the way from here to the north of South Africa, the area of Nelspruit. And I can tell you that the photos that Wally showed are very representative for the tree plantations you find all the way from here up until Nelspruit. I mean, this is the general picture. And what struck me there, and there comes my question, is these are empty lands. You don't see not only no biodiversity, but also no local communities and very few people. And why is that? Because tree plantations after cattle ranching are the land use sector that provide the least jobs per hectare of land. And my question is that we need to use land, you know, for forest restoration. WWF is very much involved in that. And I wonder what you think of the opportunity cost of all these hectares of land that hardly provides a job, that could also have been used for landscape restoration. And just one more small question to Sally. You said a blunt statement that trees are good for the planet. The overwhelming majority of planted forest, which we call tree plantations, consists of alien, often invasive species, which are recognized to be the second biggest threat to the world's biodiversity. How can you call them good for the planet?
Thank you. Please be brief on your questions. The lady here on the first mic is in the front.
Hello, my name is Vivian McMenamin. I'm from Mondi. Just a question for Louise, please. I think we've heard clearly in this conference about the 1.2 billion hectares of natural forest that we are losing in Africa, and we've heard clearly that 90% of that loss is coming from the use of wood for fuel wood. Clearly for Africa as a whole, plantations are going to need to be part of a solution in actually solving people's energy needs, because we cannot expect that overnight this energy need will come from somewhere else. You talked about how useless we are at communicating, and I agree with you. But you are part of an organization who has an absolutely brilliant knack at communicating, WWF. How do you see us, in a responsible way, ensuring that plantations become part of the solution to this enormous biofuel need that we have in the rest of Africa?
Thank you. One from the back, the gentleman from the back, please. And then please be quick, because I think I will entertain the questions that are coming from the colleagues, the people that are standing, and then we go for the answers. Okay with us? Just to be respectful for those who will patiently wait. The gentleman from the back, please.
Thank you. My name is Kutelani Chivas, and I'm a forestry student. The question is directed straight to Mike Peters. Mike Peters, would you agree with me that perspective is everything in this context of plantation forestry? The thing is, yesterday we had a forestry education side event, and the definition of forestry was the biggest topic that came up. That you see, people are bringing in sentimental opinion into the definition of forestry. And it becomes a challenge, because when you're doing sentimental opinion-based decisions, saying that, no, look, this is fake forest, and these are the true forest, then it becomes a problem, because that is your own sentimental feeling. It's not scientifically based, or nobody has the actual evidence to show that what you're saying, this is how it's supposed to be. It's the same debate with the Western Cape, where they say the fynbos ecosystems are supposed to be there, and we have to make sure that we conserve them the way they are. Nobody has proof whether in the history of how many billion of years that the planet has been surviving, whether this is supposed to be what it is. So I think, Mike, if you could touch on that perspective, how far can we go with such?
Thank you. The gentleman here on the first mic, please.
Thank you, Eduardo. My name is João Soares. I'm from Portugal, and after more than 45 years of the profession on forest services and forest industry, etc., I realize more and more that the question on forestry is more and more a philosophical question, even we have technical problems to solve, of course. I got the idea that the people isn't aware that nature, as we imagine, is in fact perhaps gone. In nature, the strongest guys kill the weakest guys. In nature, the oldest are not protected. And in the human society, it doesn't happen like that. We are strongly against nature on that. So I put the question to the panel, and mainly to Wally, which I salute for their positions. What's the views relating with the world population boom and what we call the personal welfare? Don't you think that plantations, good or bad, I don't name it, are the natural, between brackets, response to the increase of the forest products consumption in the world? How to solve the question? Stop plantations, stop the human populations to increase, stop the consumption, too much consumption on personal. I think there's also more questions than technicals around plantations. Thank you.
Thank you, very comprehensive. The gentleman on the back, please.
Good day, my name is Winston Smith. A question directed to Mike Peters, very short. In terms of land use and water use, how does commercial forestry compare to other land uses in South Africa? Thanks.
Thank you very much. And last question from the gentleman here in the front.
Thank you. My name is Richard. I belong to a forestry company in this province in South Africa. I want to ask a question into the adversarial dichotomy that has emerged in this meeting. More fundamental to the issue, it seems to me, we live amongst people who simply do not have the taxonomy, the knowledge of trees that previous generations once did. If you went back 2, 3 generations, most people around could routinely name 200 or 300 species of trees in this province. We have 800 indigenous species of trees in this province. The vast population has lost this knowledge. We're looking at a cultural disinheritance which is catastrophic. There's no reason why our urban areas, our cities themselves, cannot be forests. They can be if people understand what trees are. In fact, the word tree, in my view, is not a very useful word. You have to know specific examples of what a tree is to know what to plant. Now, it seems to me that...
Can I ask your question, please? Go to your question.
What I'd like to ask the panel is, how do we put in place a massive, population-wide educational campaign to get a knowledge of environment back so that forests can be genuinely defended?
Thank you very much. I think we have 7 questions, and it's pretty natural that I think the majority is South African generated and South African specific. We are very glad that we have the point of debate in our host country in the Congress. If you bear with me to make sure that the time management allows for everyone to speak, we have maybe 1 or 2 questions that are general for the panel. And then there is the one that was put by the gentleman from Portugal, Mr. Soares, on the supply, the one that was put here by the gentleman from South Africa on the education, to bring back the knowledge and not to lose the knowledge. Then we have questions specific on challenge, like biotechnology on the industry perspective and the certification perspective for including GM trees. The questions that are addressed specifically to Mike Peter, from the student and, well, from the GFC, and the issue of energy. Can I propose that the panel, when we start from my right-hand side and go up to the end, start with the general questions, and then we move to specific ones in terms of answering. Would that be okay? All right. So, Peter, from the set of questions, and specifically on the issue of supply, education, and you can grab from the others, 2 minutes, 1, 2.
I'll choose to respond on the issue of GM trees because I think that's certainly an extremely challenging issue for us even to talk about. I've written and co-facilitated dialogues for the Forest Dialogue on this topic. The conversation is so difficult that we couldn't even agree to have a discussion. I agree with Kim. I think we have a lot more talking to do before we go down the route of adopting GM trees. Genetic technologies are amazing. Look at the advances that are being made in human health, for example, from the application of those technologies, and look at the moral and ethical dilemmas that are being posed by the possibilities of those technologies. We have those same ethical dilemmas around GM trees, just as we do around other genetic technologies, and we have to consider those ethical dimensions as much as the scientific and the economic dimensions.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sticking to the time. Wally, would you like to address the questions in general or specifically anyone?
Yeah, I have a list. I'll just go through them quickly. First of all, on the question of so-called GM trees, I think we need to get our language right here. The correct term is genetically engineered trees. Genetically modified is what we already have in the plantations that are being cloned and developed and hybridized over the years. Those are genetically modified. But genetic engineering is something very different, and that's what we're talking about. I'd like to answer or address your question, Viv. You know, 90% of the deforestation is due to little community members going and chopping down trees to burn so they can cook their food. I think that's a little bit misleading. I think we need to look very carefully at that statistic and find out where you got it from. Is it neutral, or is it something coming from people who would like to replace forests with plantations, because they would then be able to supply all the poor people in Africa with lots and lots of very fast-burning, useless wood to cook their food with. The matter of sentimental opinion from the student, I think, perspective is really important, because he needs to also consider that what he has been taught at forestry school, or plantationary school rather, is a matter of opinion. And maybe he should speak to people from the NGO sector and from the communities who are being kicked off their land all over Africa to have their land taken over by plantations, and then he might get a different perspective. The gentleman who has spent 45 years in the industry, I really appreciate his concern about nature, because that is the real concern that we have at Timberwatch. You can't allow the human population on this planet to continue increasing until there is nothing left but wall-to-wall people. There won't even be room for your plantations, Viv. So we have to start, as intelligent human beings, we need to start looking at addressing the problem of population growth. Plantation growth and population growth, sorry. World population is a real concern, but the FAO keeps telling us that it's going to increase to 9 billion and then 10 billion. Why don't they tell us we should actually start stopping the growth of human numbers so that we can save some of our planet for future generations, so that there can be some grasslands and forests left for our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, not have the whole of Africa under WWF's and Mondi's projected 300% increase in tree plantations? Thank you very much, no. The last point I'd like to talk to is Richard. Richard, you're really absolutely right about the loss of knowledge. But most of that loss of knowledge, which you find in people who are resident in what we call informal settlements around the cities of South Africa, has been lost because most of those people had at some point, either them or their parents or their grandparents, had to leave the rural areas because their land was usurped either under apartheid for saff coal plantations or state forestry plantations, sugarcane plantations, and now even more so in the Eastern Cape we see the expansion of eucalyptus plantations kicking people off their land, and they lose that knowledge because they are not allowed to remain in a natural environment where they can learn from their elders. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wally. Kim.
I think I'd like to talk about three of the topics that were raised in the questions. First one being supply. As I said before, I do believe that we need to have many solutions to the supply problems that we will have for the future. Intensely managed land for plantations is one of those. But if that's the only solution we have, we're going to do ourselves a huge disfavor. We've got to think about other solutions at the same time, including, for instance, making our cities productive landscapes of different sorts, including many species working together on finding energy sources, etc. We need to find ways to use already degraded lands in restoration situations. We need to find ways to manage many parts of our landscapes in many different ways from what we do now. But I do believe that plantations is one side of the solution. Second thing is, I am very, very concerned with some of the projections that we see on the future use of biofuels. If we just say, oh, we're going to use 90% more or 200% more in the future, I don't think that is the solution, honestly. I do believe, yes, it will increase. But if we just go with those projections, we're going to get ourselves into deep, deep trouble. The real solutions for the world's energy do lie with biofuels, but they also lie with solar energy, with wind energy, with all of the other renewable sources. If we believe that forests or plantations or whatever we call them are going to provide it all, that's not going to work. Third thing, the GM trees. I think we need to take it seriously. I mean, we don't allow it. If anybody of our member companies begin to commercially deploy genetically modified trees, we'll kick them out. That's our rules. We don't allow it in the certified area at all. I think, however, we need to discuss this because there is a sector-wide discussion coming up, and we need to relate to that before the whole dam is already broken. And I think we have the chance in the next couple of years to get that discussion to happen. I think that's really going to be very, very important for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim. Elizabeth?
I will follow Kim. And the consumption side, I fully agree, forest is not the only one solution, however, one of the most important. So if society can understand and substitute fossil uses by wood uses, renewable, from the complete chain of custody, this will be an enormous gain for the planet and for the humanity. So what I understand is this will not happen. The climate change is close up there in a convention, but what we need to do is to teach the consumer, because this movement happens in the market. So if everything is decided literally in the Convention of Climate, but does not arrive in the marketplace, nothing happens. So the consumer is the most important tool to change this full scenario to a more sustainable one. And I quite would say we should be proud of our wood production. So we are the solution, or not the only one, I fully agree, but an important one. Coming then back to NGOs, my point of view here must be good understood is from the association perspective. This is an enormously long-term conversation. What is the objective? The objective is only to open the dialogue. So years of dialogue, I'm not concerned, not at all, about the result of the dialogue. The process must happen. So what we should give ourselves, all of us, is the chance to be very, very sure that your own opinion comes from a quite good understanding. Ask yourself, from where do I have my opinion and why? Say just ABC. And so this is, do not be anxious, this is an enormous long-term conversation, as many others in the planet were. And this is the value of it. This is the great value. So when this appears here, I found this is good. Okay, people is then wanting to talk about this. So be very relaxed, but ask everything. Behave as we should do in a very good dialogue. I myself absolutely am not a scientist, so, but we are enormously in favor. Planted forests do this day and night, dialoguing with stakeholders, and so this is then what important is in this matter.
Thank you. Sorry for cutting, Elizabeth, but I want to make sure that we have the time under control. Mike Peter, the floor is yours for 2 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. So I'll try and deal with 3 questions simultaneously. There was the question from the lady that took a drive up to Nelspruit and the observations she made. There was the question from Kutalani, I think it was, who asked about definitions and what the implications of that were. And then there was a question from Winston in the front here about land use and water, and they're actually related. And so maybe why some of this discussion or this adversarial relationship perhaps between environmental NGOs and industry revolves around these definitions, is that it's not the definition that's the problem, but it's the perception that perhaps the lady had driving up to Nelspruit, that as soon as you accept that plantations are not forests, you automatically categorize them as sterile monocultures that destroy the environment, do not promote biodiversity, and impact in many parts of the world on natural forests. The problem is that the research that's come out in the last 10 years, and again during this Congress, tells you that is patently false. Whether you're talking about the Mata Atlantica in Brazil, my colleague sitting next to me, the indigenous forests and the unplanted grasslands associated with plantations in South Africa and many other, or the Congo Basin, as we've heard this week. The trend is exactly the opposite, and it's not because by planting plantations, people now have firewood that they buy from plantations. Nobody sells their plantations for firewood, nowhere in the world. It's because plantations uplift people out of poverty, either through them owning as small-scale growers, having employment in plantations, having access to clinics and education provided by forestry companies that decreases their dependence on natural forests and takes some of that pressure off. So that's the first point. Secondly, in respect of the question that was asked about land use, and it is a South African perspective, but I think it's worldwide. We heard 33% of the world's wood is coming out of plantation forests, not planted forests, plantation forests. So in South Africa, plantations occupy 1% of the area, slightly more than 1% of the agricultural area, and we use 5% of the water allocated to agriculture. So you would follow then, Madam, about your comments about jobs, that we should provide 1% of the jobs in agriculture and maybe 5 or between 1 and 5% of agricultural GDP. The figures, and again, these are official government figures, are that we are returning 22.5% of jobs in agriculture come from the forestry industry. We are returning 65% of agricultural GDP, off 1% of the land and 5% of the water used by agriculture, and we contribute 7.7% to manufacturing GDP. So my last comment, I think, on this is maybe the paradigm now needs to shift. Why are we talking about plantations as an opportunity cost to agriculture? Why are we not talking about marginal agriculture as an opportunity cost that could be better capitalized and used by plantations that then also have those additional benefits? The last point on biodiversity, compared to other agricultural uses, plantations are normally long rotation crops. So we're not ploughing the land every year as you would do with agriculture. We're not adding fertilizers every year. We don't use pesticides. We have world-leading biocontrol facilities. So I would argue, even in the plantation areas themselves, where there is loss of biodiversity because you've replaced the grassland, compared to many other crops, the environmental footprint is greatly reduced. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Luis?
Thank you. So I will take the question on restoration, and just to clarify from the beginning that we reject all those examples that if plantations they are poorly managed, obviously they are not a part of the concept of new generation plantations. Even if they are well managed but allocated on the wrong place, converting natural ecosystems or displacing local people, we don't accept them. So we are talking in the premise that plantations that are done with the best available knowledge and allocated where there is space and soil with the characteristics for them. In this context, restoration needs to come in a discussion of landscape approach, because restoration will happen where there was already in the past a change of the natural ecosystem, and we need to restore what has been lost. If it has been lost, it means that there is human presence, agriculture or other land uses, and that's where the landscape approach needs to come. We need to find space for the economic activity of those communities, of those people living in those places, economic activity which is viable through agriculture or well-managed plantations, and through a proper landscape design, find the places where we can develop those restoration activities. Now, we are in front of a massive challenge to make restoration at scale. We are not talking about restoration in pilot projects. That time has passed. And there are not many examples around the world where we can find restoration successfully done at large scale. Indeed, the Brazil and the Mata Atlântica, it's one of the few examples where I have found restoration done in the last 10 to 20 years at scale of 40,000 hectares of Mata Atlântica restored. And amazingly, the forestry sector, it's in the center of this project. Combined with strong regulation, governments, they cannot run away of their responsibilities in this process. And if the success in the Mata Atlântica exists, it's because the sector has also been successful in bringing the local communities, the farmers, into the process of restoration. It requires a massive investment, and it requires a massive new knowledge of understanding how we can propagate at scale native species. We are not talking about 1 or 2 species, but the nurseries I have seen, and you can visit in Bahia, they produce hundreds of species from Mata Atlântica. This is a completely new game, and if we want to reach the goals of millions of hectares of restoration, we need to bring the forestry and the agriculture sector into the process. About the question in Africa. Yes, it's really difficult to think how we're gonna stop deforestation in Africa if we don't provide an alternative source of those products that people living in the region need. And yes, we need to tackle the challenge of population growth, but Africa, it's the place where the population will grow in the coming decades. Although we might have very strong policies, but probably it will happen. So I have a personal opinion, again, if plantations are done properly and in the right places, we can have healthy future of forests and plantations. We can call plantations as being forests or not, but we can use them to help us achieve the objectives and to improve people's lives. But in the African context, plantations, they have been expanding at a very low rate. The numbers are there, and the plantations which exist in most of Africa, they are very poorly managed. Solutions to this, I think they are still to be invented. And that was the point I wanted to make, the challenge for the sector to think new models, how it can use its skills, its capacity of investment, of technology knowledge, and make that muscle available to the local communities in a way that you don't destroy what exists socially in those places, but you help the communities to leverage, to improve their quality of life and to realize their aspirations. I think that's the big challenge for the forestry sector in the coming decade.
Thank you very much, Luis. You were a bit generous with your 2 minutes.
1 second. Massive education campaign. I have heard that there is an amazing youth program going on this Congress. It's not very visible, but I think it is really amazing. If you want to learn about communication, engage with the youth initiative that is ongoing. They will tell you how to communicate.
Thank you very much, Luis. I think all your points are important. I'm sorry that I have to be unpolite with the colleagues regarding the time. Sally, your 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. I won't take 2 minutes. I'll try and do it in 30 seconds. The question that was addressed specifically to me was that how could I say trees are good? I don't think any of us would be at this World Congress if we thought that trees were bad. We need trees. And whether those trees are in our natural forests or in our planted forests, they are critical for our survival. So the only other thing that I would like to say is that please, we clearly don't have all the knowledge we need. We don't have all the answers. We don't understand all the issues. So for me, research is critical. Ongoing investment in understanding knowledge, understanding the issues, finding the answers, finding the solutions is something that all of us have a responsibility to continue to invest in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. We have 3 agenda items. The time is gone. Let's apologize with the people that are waiting for the room. I don't want you to go because we have here a group sitting with us that move out of their comfort zone to come and discuss a very interesting topic. And I am delighted with what I heard because I see that I have to help my colleague. Susan is trying to take note. We have to report to the Congress. We have at least some key points that struck, and particularly me, I think the human focus has been heavy on the debate. The environmental focus has been brought at least by one of the panelists. That should be levered. I think the idea that sustainable forest management is a sustainable a sustained timber supply is gone. Sustainable forest management means that forests, no matter how you classify them, are environmental, social, and economic feasible. You have to look at the three pillars, and I think this is very, very key here. There is no one tendency only in this aspect, and that leads to the debate that has to continue, that has been put for some panelists. We have we are in the starting stage. We have to continue. We have to accommodate our issues. For me, the stroke was that best practices are there. Bad practices are also there. We could see it here. And the scale, the right scale is not there yet. My challenge to the panelists before we close is that I would like them to bring to us in one sentence, the impact they have, the message they want to leave with us. I will start from Sally, okay, that we start that time? You can build from what you said. I would like to thank you very much. I have some announcements to make. While they think on their one sentence, I'll make the announcements. The one that the youth, thank you for reminding us on the youth, Luis. The youth party will take place at the Garden Court Hotel, 8 p.m., beachfront, beach party tonight, from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m., from 20 to 23. Maximum capacity, 350 people. First come, first served. Ensure that you have your badge, you will be given a wristband, you will be admitted, and you are going to learn how to communicate. That's one of the messages we bring. The youth are inviting us to be at the Garden Court Beachfront Hotel at 8 p.m. And the colleagues on the Forest and Water Action Plan, for those who are interested, will launch the action plan at 2 p.m. in room 3A. These are the announcements I have for you. Before we close, I would like to go for this quick one sentence, and the forefront, I would like to thank you very much for your attention and for your participation. I think we take with us an enormous amount of information to reflect and to go to what is needed for a sustainable future. It's a change of attitude. It's a change of way of doing things in a more sustainable way in these three pillars that I have mentioned to you, and I think we are all believers on this. Sally, please.
Thank you very much. I think my one sentence is quite simple. Let's continue communicating. Let's continue the dialogue, remembering that knowledge is never finite. It's always growing. So please continue to share and to grow knowledge. Thank you.
I have a challenge, which is for the sector to achieve in the coming decade the same level of progress on its social front as it did on the environmental front on the past decade.
So my sentence is: the solution to meeting the world's growing demands lies in research and responsible development, not population control.
Productive forests are an important alternative to mitigate the future needs.
Let's use all our creative energy to find solutions to the problems that we can identify jointly and talk about.
The propagandistic use of the word forests to describe timber plantations reminds me of the old apartheid government in South Africa, who invented many different misleading terms such as separate development and mother tongue education and all kinds of nice things to make apartheid look nice. We cannot do that to plantations, I'm afraid. They are plantations, they are not forests.
And finally, from me, I think that the implementation of the principles that I identified is very challenging. I think we have no alternative but to rise to that challenge, and in rising to that challenge, we have to be respectful and acknowledge the diversity of perspectives on this issue. Thank you.
I hope you feel as inspired and motivated as I do. Thank you very, very much for your attention, for participating. Thank you very much, the panel. Another round of applause for them, please.